Hello viewers, welcome to our lecture series on CSR, and I'm going to tell you about the need for a planetary bargain, and this is going to be part 2 of our lectures on this very topic, where we'll be talking about labor, employment and CSR. And in the previous lecture of mine, just to give you a quick recap, let me tell you what we have discussed. We talked about reasons for CSR gaining significance and what is expected from business, that we had already discussed. And apart from this, that what we are expecting from business, what business expects from the society, that also we had discussed in the previous lectures. And we had a discussion on the expectations not only at national level but also international level, and then line of limit. And after that we thought of how to find a way out, where to stop this kind of bargain, where on this planet, when we are working together, how to maintain the coexistence of each and every stakeholder. That is what we had discussed till now. And today I'll be letting you go through some other dimensions of it, where we'll be talking about the prisoner's dilemma. What is that prisoner's dilemma? The game theory, which talks about a kind of compromise which business is supposed to make. So with this as my agenda, I'm going to start my today's lecture. We'll be talking about labor, employment and CSR. That what is the way of dealing with the issues faced by the workforce, which is actually working day and night for the betterment of the business enterprise and also the society. So let us start with this aspect of labor, employment and CSR, where we'll be talking about the prisoner's dilemma. So any negotiation which we put in on the table, we find that it has to end in some kind of compromise, because whenever we are going to negotiate with some other party, some other stakeholders, we have to somehow make a compromise. The culmination, the end point of that specific negotiation is going to be the compromise, and what is basically called increasingly called as a non-zero sum game. We say that it is basically a game where the sum total is going to be zero, which means everybody is finding a win-win situation, and that is what should be the ideal point, where every stakeholder feels that our concerns are being considered. So any agreement by the government and the private sector should not be one of the confrontation. So in place of having any kind of confrontation, we should try to find an amicable solution, where every stakeholder is thinking or having this feel that our point is being considered, and the government and the society both should have this feel that business enterprise is working responsibly, their actions are responsible. So like the strategy required to solve the prisoner's dilemma, a well-known example from game theory, it should be one of the compromise. And the best solution to this prisoner's dilemma was cooperation between the main actors involved. And having said the main actors involved, my intention is to indicate towards not only the company but other stakeholders as well, because the company cannot act alone. It is the government, it is the society, it is the stakeholders, and when I say stakeholders, it includes government, it includes society, it includes taxpayers, customers, competitors, suppliers, and there is a whole chain. There is a complete chain of stakeholders who are directly or indirectly involved with the company. So when we talk about this, the solution to this prisoner's dilemma, we are basically talking about the cooperation between the main actors involved. So lack of cooperation, basically it may lead to high penalties, and the analogy here of this entire discussion is that should government or enterprise act alone, albeit seemingly in their own best interest, this would basically jeopardize their overall position. So I would say that there should be a strong presence of cooperation among all stakeholders, and nobody should feel that it is only my duty. Why only I am being considered for this very work? Why not the government, when I am talking from the corporate perspective, and vice versa? When it comes to government may think that it is not only the job of government but also the society. I personally feel that when we believe in the Indian philosophy of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, where the entire world is considered as family. If we consider that, we can find the best solution to this very problem, where there is no confrontation, there is no tussle, there is no fight, rather than having any kind of fight or feeling that my points are not being considered. Everybody feels that it is a family and we are contributing responsibly for the welfare of our society in totality. So the compromise for government and private sector is basically to develop a voluntary code of practice or social bargain that both observe. So what is the ideal way? What is the cost of that compromise? In fact, it is not at all very costly. It is quite easy if we take it, if we consider it from the right perspective in true spirit. So the government and the private sector, when we talk about these two sectors, it is basically an allocation for maintaining the system, but they all form part of the society. So the private sector and government both, they should develop a voluntary code. It should be done voluntarily, and that should become the norm. That is why we say that in place of using the term standard, we should try to make use of this term, the term norm or practice, and that is going to give a meaningful idea and meaningful solution to this very problem of prisoner's dilemma, where the stakeholders are negotiating for their own share, their own pie, and they talk about the planetary bargain. So efforts to create such a code do exist, and it is not only on paper. Basically, they exist, and if we go back to the history, we find the presence of such codes from the very early year of 1970s, when the UN developed a commission on transnational corporations. So it was the United Nations which had this idea of coming up with a code of conduct where companies and other stakeholders may observe these codes, and by simply observing those codes or voluntarily adopting those codes, we can find solution to many of the problems. And not only UN, in fact OECD has also developed guidelines for multinational enterprise, and from 1976, when the International Labour Organization, that is ILO, it talked about it organized World Employment Conference on Basic Needs. It put forward the notion of good citizenship. And when we talk about citizenship, since corporate entities, they are also regarded as an entity, they are also regarded as an individual, though it is artificial presence, it is basically an artificial entity. But when we talk about good citizenship, the corporate citizenship also comes in picture. So the best way is that whatever norms, whatever standards which are developed globally, we should observe, and not only observe, we should try to make some addition to that, because that is a bare minimum requirement. That is the minimum what you can do as a corporate enterprise. Over and above what best you can do based on the regional conditions of your country, the local problems of your environment in which you are operating, you can actually add some points or some important aspect into these standards which are developed by OECD as guidelines, or which are given by UN, or which are given by the ILO in terms of guidelines. So what is the question comes here in front of all academicians and the corporate entities? What is the outcome of all these dialogues and meetings? Number of conferences are being organized, several meetings and roundtables are being considered. What is the outcome of that? What is the final way out? The outcome is certainly the number of these international meetings around topics of significance and importance, that is called labor standards, business partnerships, and corporate sustainability, responsibility, citizenship. They are noticeably increasing. And once you find that people have started discussing about these issues, it means that they are basically caring for that. They are concerned about solving that problem. Once we start discussing about those problems or deliberating on those issues, then of course we are there to find a way out to that emerging problem. And if we look at the one part of academicians or the practitioners or critiques, to which we may call as cynics, and they will say that this is all talk and no action. To an extent it can be true from their perspective, but I personally feel that once we start discussing and deliberating, eventually it will lead to concrete action. And it is very simple, because business will demand this from their international relationships. And as Winston Churchill once said, that albeit in another context, joy is better than war. And it becomes very relevant also at this very point of time, when we are all set to, in the language of some of the experts, we are all set to witness, to see the third world war, where the war is going on. So in place of entering into a zone of war, it is better to have a discussion. And the statement given by Winston Churchill holds very true here in today's perspective, in today's scenario. So there are certain questions in front of us. Will globalization lead to lower wages? This is a question in front of not only the corporate entities, but also the practitioners, the academicians, and the government. So with the emergence of globalization, when we are considering the entire world to be globalized, and we talk about the global family, and we talk about the eliminating distances across the world, the question in front of us is whether it will lead to lower wages. Because that is a fear by the workforce, that when we are finding the world, when we are having this globalization into the practice, is it going to lower the wages? Because the countries may have that privilege of importing or taking workforce from those places where it is quite cheaper. Or altogether different perspective is that in place of exporting products, why don't you establish a unit where the cost of workforce is very less? So the countries which are having the benefit of demographic dividend may have huge benefit out of it. So the question here which comes in front of us is whether globalization is going to lower the wages. I personally feel that no, it is not. Because of course every country may have its own labor policy, their own minimum wage system. Just like for Indian perspective, I can vouch from the existing legislation that there is a system for skilled, semi-skilled and unskilled laborers, and the rates are already defined. So minimum wages is already defined. Less than that nobody is going to pay, and after that also it is open to the market forces. Depending upon the demand and supply, the workers can negotiate, the workforce can negotiate. So globalization is not going to hinder that a rate negotiation or the wages which the workforce is going to get. Another question is, should the planetary bargain to promote CSR be voluntary or compulsory? That is called mandatory. This is another question about which I am going to tell you, and about which I am going to have a brief discussion, that whether this planetary bargain to promote CSR be voluntary or it should be compulsory. The next question is, when we look at CSR and employment, is it the responsibility of corporations to create employment as well? Is it their duty to create employment? So we'll talk about the Keynesian economics, Keynesian theory of generation of employment, what Keynes has to say. That is also going to be my point of discussion in this as a response to the answer to this question. So these three questions are there in front of us, and out of these three questions I have answered to the first one, that will globalization lead to lower wages? Answer is no. The second question is about planetary bargain and globalization. So what is the link between CSR and globalization? And before that, we need to understand what is meant by globalization. Essentially, it means that the money can move to wherever the owners wish at the click of a mouse. So conveniently, efficiently and effective utilization of capital is possible only because of globalization. So globalization has actually lot many things to give. It is going to consider the entire world as a family, and the best of the resources can be taken from each and every part of the world. And not only that, your money can find the best place to be invested. So whatever capital you have, if you feel like investing, your finances, that is financial capital. It can move to wherever you wish as an owner, and wherever you find that your return on investment is going to be on the higher side. So in practice, it also means that the world has become a smaller place, because concomitant with these massive capital flows have brought advances in telecommunications and travel. As I told you that now the entire world has become flat, and the distances are eliminated because of the revolution in telecommunication and transportation. So what at times we say that an investor in Iceland is in direct contact with the Wall Street. You can invest anywhere from any part of the world. So globalization is basically, when we say that, when we use this term globalization, it basically indicates towards access to markets, and it is fine for those with physical, human and social capital to access them. Although there can be some limitations, that the countries where they lack in physical resources, human resources and social capital, of course for them there can be a problem. But reductions in telecommunication charges are gradually allowing farmers, for instance in developing countries, I can say that they can communicate directly with the industrialized world, and they can find the best price for their products, for their produce, whatever agri-produce they have. They are in direct contact with the suppliers. They can talk to middlemen and find the best price, and in fact at times they can find the best price for their produce with the help of the government rules and regulations, also with the help of minimum support price as well. For instance, if I take example of India, here we have a minimum support price which is announced by the government, and it is revised from time to time, just to ensure that farmers, they get better price of their produce. And for that, government has its own policy of procurement. So if market is not doing the procurement, government is there. It has its own warehouses where government purchases produce directly from the farmers, and in that way they are getting the good price. So this is one example that within the country it can be managed, but with the help of this technological and and the evolution in telecommunication, the farmers can also approach the right people for selling their produce and getting their best price. And this agri sector is one example to that. Even each and every industry wherever we are looking at, they can have better price of their product. So even the once mighty public monopolies, they have been broken by relatively free internet telecommunication. So globalization has what it has done, that is what we need to understand first. Then only we can talk about the role of globalization in planetary bargain and CSR. So globalization has actually enhanced the internet services, and it has led to competitive telecommunication. As we say that competition is bound to create excellence. When we find the market to be competitive, who is the ultimate beneficiary? It is the customer who is going to get the ultimate benefit. Suppose I have 10 suppliers to a product. So all 10 suppliers, they are going to offer a competitive price. And ultimate beneficiary is whom? Ultimate beneficiary is the customer. And in that process, not only the benefit is in terms of price, the quality wise also you get access to better quality products. So it can eventually increase the higher living, the standard of living also for producers and as well as the customers in working in a specific country. So the idea of relating this improved labor conditions to trade is not at all new. When we look at this perspective, after employment, if we look at the labor conditions and trade, what is the issue there? So the idea of relating improved labor conditions to trade is not at all new. And globally, when we look at the guidelines given by the ILO, already we had the rules and regulations in place. So at the international level, this has come under the heading of a social clause. We call it as a social clause. So discussions to include this in international agreements, they have also been underway for many decades, and this is not at all new to any country which is operating in the world, because ILO has its own standards and we have been getting the benefit of those standards. So although they are basically as a guideline for us to adopt, but those guidelines, they are accepted globally. So they have a general acceptance. Now the question comes, what is the intention behind having this kind of labor laws or this kind of labor guidelines issued by issued by the ILO. Objective is just to promote fair competition between developing country exporters, and the labor should get the at least respected minimum labor minimum wage they should get. That is what is the concern. So progress is including a social clause in effective international agreements. They has been painfully slow initially, but now it has gradually increased with the emergence of globalization. Because if you don't do, you won't your workforce, you won't be able to retain your workforce. So it is because some developing countries, they feel that industrialized countries, they concern about working conditions and above all to their export success. So what I personally feel that labor conditions they have improved, and it is a contribution by the companies which are basically working for the welfare of their workforce, and they understand that we have to not only act responsibly for our customers but also for our workforce which is working day and night. So a social clause is basically seen as a disguised form of protectionism, a Trojan horse. At times experts call it a Trojan horse, which is tantamount to interference in their internal affairs, while they are being asked for reciprocity and social obligations in return for trade concessions. So what is the concluding point for labor conditions and trade? Any negotiation at international level has to be handled carefully. The way out is that whatever negotiation you are making at international level, that has to be handled carefully, and the benefits and cost for both types of countries, that is industrialized countries to whom we call as developed countries, and on the other hand we have developing countries, it has to be clearly spelled out. So ILO together with OECD, they have moved towards adopting a core set of labor standards. They have basically given a core set of labor standards, and some characteristics of that I am going to put in front of you. That is freedom of association. You have the freedom as a workforce, you have a freedom to get associated, you have the right to organize and bargain collectively, and that leads to collective bargaining, and that is basically the beauty of this kind of labor standards. The prohibition of forced or compulsory labor, there is no force on any workforce to work in a company. It is their choice. They have all the freedom to decide where to work and where not to. And a minimum age for employment of children, that is also something which is prescribed under this condition. A guarantee of acceptable working condition. So not only the wages, not only the monetary aspect, but also the health aspect, or what we call as hygiene aspect, that need to be taken care by the companies if they wish, or if they feel that they are acting, they wish to act responsibly towards their workforce also. So labor conditions and trade, the social clause is going to make these companies very responsible, or acting responsible for the welfare of workforce as well. So the second question here is, should the planetary bargain to promote CSR be voluntary or compulsory, voluntary or mandatory? It is basically a very people call it as a hot point or burning point nowadays, and this is currently very much into discussion and debate. And the shenanigans, or what you call as scandals in the US, they have led government to advance their legal framework or legislation on some aspect of CSR. That is called the corporate governance part, and the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002 is basically a testimony to this, that the kind of accounting frauds or fraudulent practices, they were increasing. Just to improve the accuracy of corporate disclosures, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002 was enacted. So it is quite possible to imagine a planetary bargain arising from all the major companies in the world sitting around a table and horse trading to come up eventually with a final document. So antitrust provisions may not allow this, but stakeholders' pressure will be society's invisible hand, guiding, suggesting, protesting, campaigning, and regulating the wilder excesses which will create the planetary bargain. So I personally feel that planetary bargain is already on the way, and it should be voluntary. Let the companies volunteer to take care of their workers, and they should act responsibly. So what has actually changed? So the time has changed, and the businesses, especially in the industrialized countries, they are starting to realize that this social responsibility or acting responsibly is going to pay. And they have nothing to fear from these noble standards of conduct. So this is why the companies are increasingly adopting to the responsible practices, and they are basically acting responsibly. So with this, my dear learners, I tried to answer answer those three questions which we had with which we had started our discussion today. I hope you must have understood and enjoyed today's lecture of mine. Thank you so much.